I never thought I'd be sharing my story here, but I guess life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. My name is Mike, and I've been a sailor for the past 15 years. My job took me away from home for weeks, sometimes months at a time. I did it all for my family, for my wife Sarah and our two beautiful kids, Emily and Jack. I thought we had a perfect life, but boy was I wrong. Sarah and I met in college, and we hit it off immediately. She was everything I wanted in a partner. Smart, funny, and incredibly beautiful. We got married right after graduation, and I joined the Navy. My job was tough, but knowing I had Sarah and the kids to come home to made it all worth it. Or at least, that's what I used to believe. About a year ago, I started to notice subtle changes in Sarah's behavior. At first, it was just small things. She seemed more distant. Her phone was always on silent, and she started going out with her friends more often. I chalked it up to the stress of taking care of the kids and the house while I was away. But then, I began to feel something was off. My best friend Tom had always been a constant in our lives. He was practically family, someone I trusted with my life. We had been friends since high school, and he was even the best man at my wedding. Sarah and Tom got along well, which I thought was great. I was happy my wife had someone to lean on when I wasn't around. Little did I know they were leaning on each other a bit too much. I remember the exact moment I started to suspect something. I was on a video call with Sarah from the ship, and she seemed unusually flustered. She said she had to leave quickly because of an emergency with one of the kids. It sounded plausible, but the way she rushed off the call left a pit in my stomach. Then, one night, I came home earlier than expected from a deployment. I didn't tell Sarah because I wanted to surprise her. Instead, I got the surprise of my life. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Tom's car parked a few houses down. It struck me as odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I walked into the house and found it eerily quiet. The kids were at a sleepover, so I figured Sarah might be out with friends. I called her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I decided to wait. After about an hour, I heard the front door unlock, and Sarah walked in, looking startled to see me. She tried to hide her surprise, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "Mike, what are you doing here?" she stammered. "I got back early. Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just out with the girls," she said quickly, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Her answer didn't sit right with me. I noticed her clothes were slightly disheveled, and she looked like she had been running. My mind started racing, piecing together all the little signs I had ignored for months. Something was definitely wrong. Over the next few weeks, I tried to push my suspicions aside. I wanted to trust Sarah, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I started paying more attention to her behavior. She was always on her phone, smiling at texts she wouldn't let me see. She began to work late or go out more often, always with vague excuses. Then, one evening, I overheard a conversation that shattered my world. Sarah was in the kitchen, talking on her phone, and I caught a snippet of what she was saying. "I miss you too. I can't wait until he's gone again." My blood ran cold. I knew I had to find out the truth. I confided in my buddy Steve, who suggested hiring a private detective. At first, I was hesitant. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but Steve convinced me it was the only way to get concrete evidence. Reluctantly, I agreed. The detective, a guy named James, was a no-nonsense professional. He assured me he would get to the bottom of things quickly. I gave him all the details I could think of: Sarah's schedule, her favorite spots, and most importantly, Tom. James promised to keep me updated, and I waited anxiously for his findings. A week later, James called me with the news I had been dreading. "Mike, I think you should sit down for this," he said gravely. "Just tell me, James," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been following Sarah, and she's definitely seeing someone. They meet up regularly at a hotel on the other side of town." "I'm sorry, Mike, but it's Tom. I have photos and everything." Hearing it confirmed was like a punch to the gut. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak all at once. How could they do this to me? To our kids? I thanked James and hung up, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I knew I had to confront them, but I needed to plan it carefully. I didn't want to give them any chance to deny it or manipulate the situation. That night, I barely slept. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions and scenarios. I replayed every interaction with Tom and Sarah, looking for signs I had missed. How long had this been going on? Did they laugh behind my back, thinking I was too stupid to notice? The betrayal cut deep, and I knew I had to confront them, but not before gathering every piece of evidence I could. The next morning, I called James again. I need everything you've got. Photos, videos, times, places. I need to make sure there's no way they can wriggle out of this. James agreed and promised to deliver everything by the end of the week. Meanwhile, I tried to act normal around Sarah, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. Every time she smiled at me or said she loved me, I felt a surge of anger and disgust. How could she lie so effortlessly? Finally, the day came when James handed me the evidence. It was all there, in black and white. Photos of Sarah and Tom entering and leaving the hotel, timestamps proving their meetings coincided with her girls' nights and late work hours. My hands shook as I looked through the images, each one a dagger to my heart. Armed with the evidence, I knew it was time to confront them. I called Steve and asked him to be there for support. I needed someone to witness the confrontation, to keep me grounded if things got out of hand. Steve agreed, and we planned the confrontation for the next day. I decided to confront them at Tom's place, where I knew they would feel cornered. Sarah had mentioned she was going to visit a friend that evening, and I had no doubt it was Tom. I told Steve to meet me there, and we waited in my car, parked a few houses down. As we watched, Sarah's car pulled up, and she went inside. My heart pounded in my chest as I nodded to Steve. "Let's do this," I said, my voice shaking with anger. We walked up to the door, and I knocked loudly. After a few moments, Tom opened the door, his face going pale when he saw me. "Mike, what are you doing here?" he stammered. "I think you know exactly why I'm here," I replied coldly, pushing past him into the house. Sarah stood in the living room, her face a mask of shock and fear. "Mike, what are you doing?" she exclaimed, trying to put on an innocent act. "Cut the crap, Sarah. I know everything," I said, throwing the photos on the coffee table. "I know about you and Tom. I know about the hotel. I have proof." The color drained from Sarah's face as she looked at the photos, then back at me. "Mike, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "You betrayed me. You both did. I trusted you, and this is how you repay me?" Tom tried to step in, but I held up a hand. "Don't even start, Tom. You were my best friend. How could you do this to me?" There was a tense silence as Sarah and Tom exchanged guilty looks. I felt my anger boiling over, and before I knew it, I lunged at Tom, grabbing him by the collar. "You piece of shit!" I yelled, my fist connecting with his jaw. He stumbled back, and Sarah screamed. Steve jumped in, pulling me off Tom before I could do more damage. "Mike, stop! He's not worth it," Steve said, holding me back. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "We're done, Sarah. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm taking the kids. I won't let you destroy their lives like you destroyed mine." Sarah started to cry, but I felt no sympathy. I turned to leave, but not before giving Tom one last glare. "I hope it was worth it," I said coldly, then walked out the door with Steve by my side. As we drove away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but at least now, I could start to rebuild my life without the lies and betrayal. This was just the beginning of the end, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I spent the night at Steve's place. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much left to say. My mind was a storm of emotions, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Sarah's tear-streaked cheeks, Tom's look of guilt. I wanted to be numb, but the pain was relentless. The next morning I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca, and she came highly recommended. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, her voice calm and reassuring. "We'll make sure you get what you deserve, Mike," she said. "Gather all your financial documents, any records you have of Sarah's infidelity, and we'll take it from there." I spent the rest of the day collecting everything. Bank statements, text messages, emails. I even printed out the photos James had given me. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I couldn't believe this was happening. I'd sacrificed so much for my family, and this was my reward. That evening, I went back home. The kids were with Sarah's parents for the weekend, so I had time to figure out how to break the news to them. The house felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to the home we had built together. I sat in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall, wondering where it all went wrong. Sarah came home later, looking exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. "Mike, we need to talk," she said quietly. "There's nothing left to talk about, Sarah," I replied, my voice flat. "I'm filing for divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer." She sat down across from me, her hands trembling. "Please, Mike, just listen to me. I know I messed up, but it wasn't all my fault. You were never here. I was lonely. Tom was there for me when you weren't." I felt a surge of anger. "So this is my fault now? I was working to provide for our family, Sarah. I was out there risking my life, while you were here screwing my best friend." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry, Mike. I know I hurt you. But can't we try to fix this? For the kids?" I shook my head. "You should have thought about that before you decided to betray me. I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's nothing left." She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I wanted to feel pity, but all I felt was numbness. "I'll be staying at Steve's until I find a place," I said, standing up. "You can have the house for now, but I'm taking the kids. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this." As I packed my bags, I couldn't help but think about the life we had built together. All the memories, the good times, the dreams we had shared. It was all gone now, shattered by lies and deceit. I knew this was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved into a small apartment and focused on my work and the kids. Emily and Jack were confused and hurt by the separation, and it broke my heart to see them suffer. I tried to be strong for them, but every day was a struggle. Rebecca worked tirelessly on my case. She assured me that we had a strong position, given the evidence of infidelity. "We'll fight for full custody," she said, "and we'll make sure Sarah doesn't get more than she deserves." I nodded, grateful for her support. But the thought of a long, drawn-out legal battle was exhausting. I just wanted it to be over, to move on with my life. One evening, I got a call from James. "Hey, Mike, I've been keeping an eye on things, and I thought you should know. Tom's been spending a lot of time at your house." My stomach turned. "What do you mean? He's there almost every day. Sometimes he stays overnight. It looks like he's practically living there." I felt a surge of rage. "Thanks for letting me know, James. I'll take care of it." I hung up and immediately called Sarah. She answered on the third ring, her voice wary. "Mike, what is it?" "Why is Tom at our house?" I demanded. "Are you seriously letting him move in while we're still married?" "Mike, it's not like that," she said quickly. "He's just helping out with the kids. They need some stability right now." I laughed bitterly. "Stability? You think having your lover move in is going to provide stability? This is a new low, even for you, Sarah." "Please, Mike," she pleaded. "Can't we just try to make this as painless as possible for the kids?" "Painless? The only way this ends painlessly is if you stop seeing him. But I know you won't do that, will you?" She was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry, Mike. I really am." "Save your apologies," I snapped. "You'll hear from my lawyer." I ended the call, my hands shaking with anger. I couldn't believe the audacity of it all. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. It was like they were rubbing my face in their betrayal. The next day I met with Rebecca and told her everything. She listened carefully, her expression grim. "This could work in our favor," she said. "If we can prove that Sarah's relationship with Tom is detrimental to the children, it could strengthen our case for custody." I nodded, grateful for her determination. "Do whatever it takes. I just want my kids to be safe and happy." Rebecca filed the necessary motions, and we prepared for the upcoming court battle. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to fight for my children. In the meantime, I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Emily and Jack. We spent weekends at the park, went to the movies, and tried to find moments of joy amidst the chaos. I wanted them to know that no matter what happened, I would always be there for them. One evening, Emily came to me with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, why can't we all just be together again? I miss Mommy." I pulled her into a hug, my heart breaking. "I know, sweetie. I miss her too. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and it's not always easy to fix them." "Is it because of Uncle Tom?" she asked. her voice small. I hesitated, not wanting to burden her with the ugly truth. It's complicated, Emily, but I promise, no matter what, we'll get through this together. She nodded, sniffling. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl, I whispered, holding her close. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on being the best father I could be. It was hard, but my kids were my everything, and they needed me to be strong. Finally, the court date arrived. Rebecca and I walked into the courtroom, determined to win this battle. Sarah and Tom were there, looking nervous. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but I pushed it aside. This was for my kids. The hearing was intense. Rebecca presented our evidence, painting a clear picture of Sarah and Tom's betrayal. Sarah's lawyer tried to argue that the affair didn't impact her ability to be a good mother, but Rebecca was relentless. In the end, the judge ruled in our favor. I was granted primary custody of Emily and Jack, and Sarah was ordered to move out of the house. Tom was barred from having any contact with the kids for the time being. As we left the courtroom, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a step in the right direction. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but for now, I could focus on rebuilding my life and being the father my kids deserved. That evening, I sat down with Emily and Jack and explained the situation as best as I could. Mommy and I are going to live in different houses for a while, I said gently, but we both love you very much, and we'll always be here for you. They nodded, their eyes wide with understanding. We love you too, Daddy, Jack said, his voice strong. As I hugged them tightly, I knew that no matter what happened, we would get through this together. It wouldn't be easy, but we had each other, and that was enough. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, and I was ready to face it head on. The days following the court ruling were tense and full of anxiety. Sarah moved out of the house as ordered, but the transition was far from smooth. Emily and Jack had so many questions, and each one was like a dagger to the heart. I did my best to answer them truthfully, without burdening them with too much of the painful details. One Saturday, I received a text from Tom. It was the first contact we had since the confrontation at his place. Mike, can we talk? Just us, please. I stared at the message, a flood of emotions washing over me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him wallow in his guilt, but another part of me wanted answers. Why did he do it? How could he betray me like that? I decided to meet him, but on my terms. Fine. Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks at 5 p.m., I replied. The warehouse was a quiet, secluded place, a spot we used to hang out at as kids. It felt fitting to confront him there, away from prying eyes. I arrived early, the salty sea air filling my lungs as I paced the dusty floor of the warehouse. Memories of our childhood flashed through my mind. We used to dream about our futures here, about the adventures we'd have. Never in a million years did I imagine this would be our reality. At exactly 5 p.m., Tom walked in, looking nervous and tired. Thanks for meeting me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I crossed my arms, keeping a safe distance. Say what you have to say, Tom. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry, Mike. I know that doesn't begin to cover it. But I am. I never meant for any of this to happen. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my anger in check. How long, Tom? How long were you and Sarah seeing each other behind my back? He looked down, ashamed. About 6 months. It started when you were on that extended deployment last year. We never planned for it to go this far. I laughed bitterly. So what? It was just a fling at first? And then you decided it was okay to destroy my family? It wasn't like that, he insisted. We were both lonely and things just happened. But I swear, Mike, I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, Tom, I snapped. You destroyed everything. Our friendship, my marriage, my trust. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, let me make it right. I'll do whatever it takes. I shook my head, the weight of his betrayal settling heavily on my shoulders. There's nothing you can do, Tom. It's too late for that. You made your choice, and now we all have to live with the consequences. The conversation ended in a strained silence. Tom left, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, feeling a mix of anger and sorrow. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes. The damage was done, and all we could do now was move forward. Life didn't get any easier after my talk with Tom. Sarah and I communicated only when necessary, usually about the kids. Every exchange was tense and filled with unspoken resentment. I could see the toll it was taking on Emily and Jack. They were caught in the crossfire, and I hated it. One day I got a call from the school. Emily had gotten into a fight. It was so unlike her that I knew something must have pushed her over the edge. I rushed to the school, my heart pounding with worry. The principal, Mrs. Harris, greeted me with a stern expression. "Mr. Thompson, Emily is in my office. She got into a physical altercation with another student." I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Can I see her?" She led me to her office where Emily sat, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she ran into my arms. "Daddy, I'm sorry," she sobbed. I held her tight, my heart breaking. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just tell me what happened." Through her tears, Emily explained that a boy in her class had said something mean about our family. "He said you and Mommy are getting a divorce because you don't love us anymore," she cried. I felt a surge of anger but kept it in check. "Mrs. Harris, can you give us a moment?" She nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind her. I knelt down to Emily's level, wiping her tears away. "Listen to me, Emily. Your mom and I love you and Jack more than anything. This divorce isn't because of you. It's because of mistakes that grown-ups made." She sniffled, looking up at me with big, sad eyes. "I just want things to go back to how they were." "I know, sweetie, I know. But sometimes things change, and we have to find a new way to be happy. We'll get through this together, okay?" She nodded, hugging me tightly. I held her for a long time, wishing I could take away her pain. A week later, I had another run-in with Sarah. This time it was at a parent-teacher conference. We had agreed to attend together for the sake of the kids, but the tension between us was palpable. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal in her eyes, and it was all I could do to stay civil. After the conference, we stepped outside into the cool evening air. "Mike, can we talk?" Sarah asked, her voice tentative. I sighed, tired of these conversations. "What is it, Sarah?" She took a deep breath, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. "I know you hate me, and I don't blame you, but I want you to know that I'm trying to do better for the kids. I've ended things with Tom." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "And why should I believe you?" "Because it's the truth," she said quietly. "I realized how much I've hurt everyone. I'm seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I did what I did. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance to prove that I can be a good mother to our kids." Her words hit me hard. I wanted to believe her, but the wounds were still too fresh. "It's going to take time, Sarah, a lot of time. And right now my priority is the kids." "I understand," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you for at least listening." I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance we could find a way to co-parent without tearing each other apart. Despite Sarah's promises, things didn't improve much. She was still living in a state of denial, trying to piece together a semblance of normalcy that just wasn't there anymore. The kids were struggling with the changes, and I was doing my best to hold everything together. One evening, after putting Emily and Jack to bed, I sat down with a glass of whiskey, trying to drown out the chaos of my thoughts. That's when my phone rang. It was Steve. "Hey, man," he said, his voice serious. "I need to talk to you about something." "What is it?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread. "I saw Sarah and Tom together today," he said bluntly. "At the park. They were talking, and it didn't look like they were just friends." My grip tightened on the phone. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I thought you should know." "Thanks, Steve," I said, ending the call. I sat there, the room spinning around me. Had Sarah lied to me again? Was she still seeing Tom despite everything? The thought was unbearable. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to confront her, once and for all. The next day I called Sarah and asked her to meet me at a cafe. She sounded wary but agreed. When I arrived, she was already there, looking anxious. "Mike, what's going on?" she asked as I sat down. "I need to know the truth, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. Are you still seeing Tom? She looked taken aback. No, I told you I ended it. Then why was Steve telling me he saw you two together at the park yesterday? Her eyes widened in surprise and then narrowed in frustration. Mike, it's not what you think. Tom was just returning some things he borrowed, that's all. Do you expect me to believe that? I demanded. After everything you've done, do you really think I can just take your word for it? She sighed, rubbing her temples. I get it. You don't trust me. But I swear, I'm not lying this time. I stared at her, searching for any sign of deceit. Her eyes were earnest, pleading. For a moment, I wanted to believe her, but the scars of betrayal were too deep. This is your last chance, Sarah. If I find out you're lying again, I'll make sure you never see the kids. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'm sorry, Mike. For everything. I stood up, feeling a mixture of anger and sorrow. I hope, for the kids' sake, that you're telling the truth. As I walked out of the cafe, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The wounds of betrayal might heal with time, but the scars would always remain. I knew I had to stay strong, for Emily and Jack, and for myself. No matter what happened next, I was determined to protect my family from any more pain. The aftermath of the confrontation with Sarah left me feeling more drained than ever. The emotional roller coaster seemed never-ending, and the toll it was taking on me and the kids was evident. Emily and Jack were trying their best to adjust, but the cracks were showing. One evening, while we were having dinner, Emily suddenly burst into tears. I miss Mommy, she sobbed, pushing her plate away. Jack, too young to fully grasp the situation, just looked confused and scared. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their pain. I know, sweetie. I miss her too, I said, pulling her into a hug. But things are going to be okay. I promise. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. Memories of happier times flooded my mind, but they felt like they belonged to another life. I felt a deep sense of loss, not just for my marriage, but for the family we once were. I decided it was time to see a therapist. The constant strain was affecting my ability to be the parent Emily and Jack needed. I found a therapist named Dr. Taylor, who specialized in dealing with family trauma and infidelity. It was one of the best decisions I made during that turbulent period. Dr. Taylor's office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a soothing voice. Tell me what's been going on, Mike, she said gently. I took a deep breath and began to pour out everything. The affair, the betrayal, the impact on the kids, my own feelings of anger and helplessness. She listened patiently, occasionally asking questions to help me articulate my thoughts and feelings more clearly. Mike, it's understandable that you're feeling a mix of emotions right now, she said after I finished. Betrayal from someone you trusted so deeply can shake your entire sense of reality. It's important to acknowledge these feelings and give yourself permission to grieve. I nodded, feeling a bit of relief just from being able to talk about it openly. I just don't know how to move forward. Every time I look at the kids, I see how much they're hurting, and it kills me. Children are resilient, Dr. Taylor said. They take their cues from you. If they see you working through your pain and striving to create a stable environment, they'll adapt. It's also important to maintain open communication with them, appropriate to their age, so they don't feel left in the dark. She gave me practical advice on how to talk to the kids about the divorce, how to reassure them that they were loved and that none of this was their fault. It was a long, ongoing process, but I started to see small improvements. Emily and Jack began to open up more, and I made sure to spend quality time with them, creating new memories to help overshadow the painful ones. Sarah, true to her word, kept her distance from Tom. She continued to see her therapist and worked on rebuilding her relationship with the kids. We had weekly family counseling sessions to help us navigate co-parenting and to provide a safe space for Emily and Jack to express their feelings. One evening, during a particularly difficult session, Emily looked at Sarah and asked, "Mommy, why did you hurt Daddy?" Sarah's face crumpled, and she took a deep breath before answering. "I made a terrible mistake, Emily. I hurt Daddy, and I hurt you and Jack. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to be a better person, and I promise to always be honest with you from now on." Emily nodded, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and understanding. I just want us to be happy again, she whispered. It was a painful but necessary conversation. Slowly, the kids started to rebuild their trust in Sarah. I remained wary, but seeing her genuine efforts to change gave me a glimmer of hope that we could co-parent effectively for the sake of our children. Months passed and life settled into a new routine. I focused on my work, spending time with the kids and taking care of myself. Sarah and I managed to maintain a civil relationship, communicating only about the children and logistical matters. One day, while I was picking up Emily and Jack from school, I ran into an old friend, Lisa. We had known each other since high school, but lost touch over the years. She was recently divorced and had a son in the same class as Emily. "Mike, it's been ages," she said with a warm smile. "How are you?" We exchanged pleasantries, and before I knew it, we were talking about our lives, the challenges of single parenthood, and everything in between. It felt good to reconnect with someone who understood what I was going through. A few weeks later, Lisa invited me and the kids over for a barbecue. It was the first social event I had attended since the separation, and I was nervous, but it turned out to be a wonderful evening. The kids played together, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of normalcy. Lisa and I continued to see each other, slowly building a friendship that felt natural and comforting. She never pried into my past, and I appreciated her understanding and support. It was too soon to think about anything beyond friendship, but having someone to talk to made the days a little brighter. Just when I thought things were finally settling down, life threw another curveball my way. One evening, while I was at the grocery store, I ran into Tom. He looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see him. "Mike, hey," he said awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot. I felt a surge of anger, but took a deep breath to calm myself. "Tom, look, I know you're probably the last person who wants to see me right now, but I've been meaning to talk to you," he said, his voice earnest. I crossed my arms, not ready to make this easy for him. "Talk about what, Tom? How you betrayed me? How you helped destroy my family?" He flinched at my words, but nodded. "Yes, all of that. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to apologize. I've been going to therapy too, trying to understand why I did what I did. I lost a lot because of my actions, and I want to make amends." "Amends?" I scoffed. "How do you even begin to make amends for something like this?" "I know I can't fix what I broke, but I'm here if you ever want to talk, and if there's anything I can do to help, I will," he said, his voice sincere. I stared at him for a long moment, weighing his words. Part of me wanted to punch him right there in the store, but another part of me recognized the effort he was making. "We'll see, Tom, but don't expect anything more than that." He nodded, looking relieved. "That's all I can ask for." "Thank you, Mike." As I walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could all find a way to move forward from this mess. The encounter with Tom stirred up old wounds, but it also made me realize how far I had come. Therapy had helped me understand my own feelings and process the pain of betrayal. I was learning to let go of the past, to focus on the present and the future. One day, during a session with Dr. Taylor, she asked me about forgiveness. "Do you think you could ever forgive Sarah and Tom?" she inquired gently. I thought about it for a long moment. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But not for them. For me. Holding on to all this anger and bitterness is exhausting." "Forgiveness is a journey," Dr. Taylor said. "It's not about condoning their actions, but about freeing yourself from the hold those actions have on you." Her words resonated with me. I realized that forgiveness was more about my own healing than about absolving them of their guilt. It was about taking back control of my life and finding peace. As the months turned into a year, life began to take on a new rhythm. Emily and Jack adjusted to the new normal, and their laughter once again filled the house. Sarah and I managed to co-parent effectively, putting our children's needs above our past grievances. My friendship with Lisa grew stronger. We spent a lot of time together with our kids, and eventually, our relationship began to deepen. It wasn't rushed or forced, it just felt right. Lisa was a source of comfort and understanding, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of happiness. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the kids play, Lisa turned to me and said, "You've come a long way, Mike. I'm proud of you." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. I couldn't have done it without you, Lisa. Thank you for being there for me. She took my hand, her eyes full of sincerity. We all deserve a second chance at happiness. As I looked at her, I realized she was right. Life had thrown some hard punches, but I had survived. I had found a way to move forward, to rebuild, and to find joy again. The journey wasn't over, but I was no longer walking it alone. With the support of my children, my friends, and the newfound hope in my heart, I knew I could face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. As the second year since the betrayal approached, the pieces of my life were finally starting to fit back together. Emily and Jack were thriving, Sarah and I had managed to find a stable co-parenting rhythm, and my relationship with Lisa had blossomed into something more meaningful. Despite the initial turmoil, I felt stronger and more grounded than ever. However, one aspect of my life remained unresolved: the finalization of the divorce. While Sarah and I had reached a temporary agreement on custody and finances, the legal process had been dragging on. It was time to bring this chapter to a close. I met with Rebecca to discuss the final steps. "We've made significant progress, Mike," she said, reviewing the documents. "Sarah has agreed to the terms we proposed, which means we can finalize the divorce soon. Are you ready for this?" I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. "Yes, I'm ready. I need this to be over so we can all move on." Rebecca nodded, her expression supportive. "Well, schedule a final meeting to sign the papers. After that, you'll be officially divorced. It's a big step, but I think it's the right one for you and the kids." A few days later, Sarah and I met at Rebecca's office to sign the divorce papers. The atmosphere was tense but civil. We both knew this was necessary, even if it was painful. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of regret and acceptance. "Mike, I just want to say again that I'm sorry for everything. I know I can never undo the hurt I caused, but I hope we can continue to be good parents to Emily and Jack." I nodded, appreciating her words but not ready to fully let go of the past. "We will. The kids come first, always." With a few signatures, our marriage was officially over. It felt surreal, but also liberating. I walked out of Rebecca's office with a sense of finality, knowing that this chapter of my life had finally come to an end. With the divorce behind me, I focused on the future. My relationship with Lisa had grown deeper and more committed. We took things slow, making sure our kids were comfortable with the changes. Over time, our families blended seamlessly, and I found myself looking forward to the possibilities ahead. One evening, while we were having dinner at Lisa's house, she brought up an idea that had been on my mind as well. "Mike, I've been thinking, what if we moved in together? It feels like we're already a family, and I think it would be good for all of us." I looked at her, my heart swelling with affection and hope. "I've been thinking the same thing, Lisa. I think it's time." We discussed the logistics, deciding to sell my house and find a new place where we could start fresh. It was a big step, but it felt right. Our kids were excited about the idea, and the thought of building a new life together brought me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. As we prepared for the move, I received an unexpected message from Tom. He wanted to meet one last time before I moved away. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part knew that this meeting could provide the closure I needed. I agreed to meet him at the same warehouse where we had confronted each other months ago. When I arrived, Tom was already there, looking more worn and weary than before. "Thanks for coming, Mike," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. I nodded, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Tom?" He took a deep breath, struggling to find the right words. "I know there's nothing I can say to make up for what I did, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry. Losing our friendship was one of the hardest things I've ever experienced. I've learned a lot about myself through this process, and I just hope someday you can forgive me." I listened, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give easily, Tom. You broke my trust, and that's not something that heals overnight. But I do appreciate your apology." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I understand. I wish you all the best, Mike. You deserve happiness." "Thank you," I said, turning to leave. "Take care of yourself, Tom." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. I knew I wasn't ready to fully forgive him, but I also knew I couldn't carry the burden of anger forever. Letting go of that weight allowed me to move forward with a lighter heart. Moving in with Lisa and blending our families was a challenge, but it was also incredibly rewarding. We found a beautiful house near the kids' school, with enough space for everyone to feel at home. The kids adjusted quickly, and the sound of their laughter filled our new home with joy. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lisa took my hand and smiled. "We've come a long way, Mike. I'm so glad we found each other." I squeezed her hand, feeling grateful for the journey that had led us here. "Me too, Lisa. I never thought I'd find happiness again, but here we are." As the days turned into weeks, our new life took shape. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and everyday moments together, creating new memories to replace the painful ones. I felt a sense of fulfillment and contentment that I hadn't experienced in years. One afternoon, while cleaning out some old boxes, I came across the photos and documents from the private detective. They were a stark reminder of the betrayal and pain I had endured. For a moment I felt a surge of anger and sadness, but then I took a deep breath and decided it was time to let go. I gathered the photos and documents and took them to the backyard. I lit a small fire in the fire pit and watched as the evidence of my past burned away. It was a symbolic act, a way to release the hurt and make space for the new life I was building. As the last of the flames died down, Lisa came out to join me. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the fire. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace. "Yeah, everything's okay. Just letting go of the past." She smiled, wrapping her arms around me. "I'm proud of you, Mike. You've come so far." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, kissing her gently. As we stood there, holding each other, I knew that I had finally found the closure I needed. The scars of betrayal would always be a part of my story, but they no longer defined me. I had learned to forgive, to let go, and to embrace the future with hope and love. The journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and healing had been long and arduous, but it had also been transformative. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed, found new love, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. Sarah and I continued to co-parent effectively, putting our children's needs first. Emily and Jack were happy and thriving, adjusting well to the new dynamics of our blended family. They were resilient, and their smiles and laughter were constant reminders of why it was all worth it. Lisa and I grew closer every day, our bond strengthened by the challenges we had faced and overcome together. We built a life filled with love, support, and joy, creating a home where our children could feel safe and cherished. Looking back, I realized that while the betrayal had shattered my world, it had also led me to a place of greater understanding and fulfillment. I had learned to value honesty, communication, and the importance of surrounding myself with people who truly cared for me. In the end, I found that happiness wasn't something that could be taken away by betrayal. It was something that I had the power to rebuild, piece by piece, with the support of my loved ones and the strength within myself. As I stood on the porch with Lisa, watching our children play in the yard, I knew that I had finally found peace. The past was behind me, and the future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at home.